Oh no, it's the Wicked Witch of dental insurance. Oh no, it's the Wicked Witch of dental insurance.
I'm going to reduce all of your fees.
But it costs more to run a practice.
I don't care.
Oh no. Hey, dentists and friends, it's Paul, Dr. Nacho. I'm sitting with one of my favorite people and patients on earth. We did a full mouth implant case back in 2008 when I was only a 31-year-old dentist. Came in today to get it for us to look at it. It looks awesome. Life-changing impact of dental implants. I'm going to ask Rick, what has been the best part of having these teeth?
Oh, I could smile anytime I want, and I can eat anything I want, and they feel like my real teeth.
That's just so cool. And if someone was saying, my patients, they're not going to go for it because it's too expensive, was the financial investment for you worth it?
Oh, without a doubt, 100%. I would do it again if I had to.
Hey, dentists and friends. Welcome to Dental Nachos TV. It's Paul, Dr. Nacho Goodman. I am so excited for what we have in store for you tonight. An incredibly awesome speaker, dentist, leader, person who's going to help you learn how to exceed your expectations. The $1 Million Take-Home Formula with Dr. Scott Leune. Dr. Scott, you can join me on stage whenever you want. Thanks so much for being here on Dental Nachos TV. We truly appreciate it. I love this topic. Tell us for a few minutes before we start with you. Tell us what inspired you to teach dentists about this specifically, the $1 Million Take-Home Formula.
Yeah, what I see is a lot of dentists are struggling financially. They're working hard, they're working harder, they're trying to manage a lot of things, changes as well, hygienists getting paid more, supply costs going up, insurance issues. And the entire time it feels like, for many of them, they're not really happy.
Yeah.
And when you look at what they're doing, it's almost like their practice is defining their life instead of the practice fueling a different life.
Okay.
And when we are able to get income levels up really high, such as like $1 million a year take home pay, that is a wealth of money, an excess of choice, right, so that dentists could start restructuring their life and balancing it out a bit. And in working with a whole lot of dentists, it's just not that complicated to get them to take home $1 million or more every year. And I know that sounds maybe crazy to some, but it's a reality for a growing number.
And I think it's great. I don't know if you noticed my Ted Lasso thing up here with the believe sign from that show. I don't know if that show, but they have that with Ted. I mean, dentistry, there's a lot of self-limiting beliefs. It's happened to me. Dental school doesn't talk about money. They charge a lot of money, Scott, but they don't talk about it. It's kind of weird. Then you get out of dental school. And, I don't know if you saw the Wicked Witch of dental insurance, my daughter there, dental insurance is one of the things you talk about, supply costs going up, pay for your team. Dental insurance is paying you less for work that costs more to deliver. So there's so many factors that influence this annoyance factor. And I'm so glad we're going to hear from you how to increase happiness. It's a big part of Dental Nachos, increasing happiness, decreasing annoyance, reducing crying inside. That's number one KPI of every dentist, Scott. How many times a day do you feel like crying inside? Class 2 ring thing flies across the room, you cry inside a little bit. Patient said, why isn't my insurance cover 33 veneers? Even though I have 32 teeth, you cry inside. So I want to start with you in a minute, but before that, tell us a little bit about your story. Breakaway seminars, so many people know this as an amazing place to learn about startup practice. I know you have more than that, but just tell us a little bit about your story and background for our audience.
Yeah, I'm going to give you the really abbreviated version. I graduated in 2005. I built a startup practice that was seeing almost 400 new patients a month. And right out of school, a few months in, I broke my back in 4 places, crushed all the nerves that went to my legs, and ended up being in and out of a wheelchair for 11 years.
Wow.
All the while trying to build my family. Now I have 5 kids, and build my practice. That led me to have to pull out of the chair, go into the business side. And I had a very windy path, lots of ups and downs, made millions, lost millions, built and sold practices and DSOs and marketing companies and call centers. And you fast forward to today, And I've learned a lot of the truths. And it's interesting how they're so different from what we do and what we're told. And today, I give these courses that are very intense, 2-day training courses, 400 pages of content. And I spend my time training dentists. I spend my time coaching dentists one-on-one. And I also help run my parent company that supports 26,000 dentists every day. And so that's what I do. My education company through all my courses is called Breakaway Seminars, where I've got 4 main courses: how to start a $2 million startup, how to clean up and grow an existing practice. That's my business master's course. And then a course for office managers and a course for people that want to grow multi-location.
That's awesome. I mean, one of the things I was sharing, I like to be part of this with what we do too, is, we get so excited to transform a patient's mouth, right? The before and after. They got dentures that flop around. Now they snap in. That little case I showed before, that was a patient who came to me who needed all of his teeth removed at the age of like 50. And he said, I transformed his life with a fixed implant hybrid. But we can do this for dentists too, right? And you've done this for dentists. Before we got on, you were talking with me, the impact of some of these courses on the lives of these dentists, not just the money part, Scott, but the morale part. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, I think a lot of us, maybe most of us, look at our life and we know there's things we want that are different. We look at our practice, we know there's things we need to do. And unfortunately, the day gets so loud and busy that we're deaf sometimes to the things that actually matter. And we blink, and it's been years, and we've been doing the busy, loud stuff that maybe doesn't bring us happiness or success. Sometimes it takes resetting our assumptions about the practice to open up kind of a new vision of what's possible and to give us this motivation and drive. Sometimes it's about learning how to get rid of the pain points. And once those are gone, it's easier to move forward. But always, it has to do with resetting what you prioritize. Yeah. And so I'm going to try, in this little hour we have together, try to go through some important things that are part of the ingredients, really, of creating high take-home pay. And even if we fail at achieving $1 million take-home pay, we might end up at 800 grand. And if we succeed, we might end up at 1.5. Right. And for most dentists, that is more than they ever thought. And there's so much good that can be done with that kind of money. There's time that can be created. There's things we could do for our practice, for our team, reinvesting in the team, for our families. I mean, for our health, for our relationships. We could create new passions. Just life is different. Yeah. When we don't have dentists tattooed on our forehead and we're not handcuffed to the recall schedule. Life is different. Yeah. And so part of that change has to do with making more money. And that's what I'm going to talk about.
Awesome. I love that. I'm going to turn over to you. I'll be back here at the end. We'll do a Q&A. People who are watching and hear us live on Zoom, feel free to ask questions in the Q&A. I'll ask them to Scott at the end. Thanks so much for being here, Scott. Truly appreciate it. I'll let you share your screen now.
Awesome. Yeah, share my screen here. Okay. So you should see my screen right now, the $1 million take-home pay formula. All right, so let's dive in. So, we want to take home $1 million. That's going to be our first goal. Goal number 1 is take home $1 million. And we've got our practice, and just understand that when we say take home $1 million, we're not talking about next year. We are talking about every single year for the rest of our career. And I just want to put it up on a slide because it doesn't just change our life. It changes the lives of everyone attached to us. For example, in 1 year, my mom suffered a severe stroke. Actually, while I was lecturing, I had to put her up in an incredibly expensive facility, have help for her, and a type of facility that gave her a life. At the same year, my best friend's house burned down and had to take in his family and loan him money to rebuild another house. And at the same time, we had a major medical issue happen that also cost money. And never once did I have to compromise anything. And it's because there's extra money. There's excess money, which gives us excess choice. And what's interesting is that most success in my mind comes from doing these simple, small things consistently. It's not from some big choice. It's from choosing to work out 20 minutes every day. That brings health and success. It's not like running one marathon. And these choices are repeated year after year after year. They become habits. And I want us to start with the phase one baseline habit of we're going to bring home $1 million take home pay every single year. And we're going to do it in an environment that is more difficult than it has been in the past. We've got competition from DSOs and from each other. We've got, of course, insurance companies making it difficult for us. Our economy is teetering on a recession potentially, and we've got all of our costs going up. I mean, look at what hygienists are having to get paid these days compared to 4 or 5 years ago. Things are more difficult. And while they're more difficult, I'm going to show you it's actually very straightforward when we have the right focus to do the right little things every day and take home $1 million. And I don't want to compromise your version of this. This is my family. I got 5 kids. My youngest is 4. I got 4-year-old, 6-year-old, 10, 13, 15, and been married 20 years. And so nothing I'm going to talk about ever is going to compromise this. And actually, my philosophy is we should fulfill our personal wish list, and whatever time is left over, give that leftover time to the company and go make $1 million inside of that little box. In other words, screw the practice. I'm not going to compromise my 4-year-old Catalina to cut another tooth. No, screw the practice. I'm going to maximize my decisions when it comes to my personal life. And whatever time is left over, that small amount of time is going to go to my company. And because it's a small amount of time and not excess time, it forces me to be very deliberate about the decisions I make. And we're going to start with some smart business models on how to take home $1 million a year. They're actually, I'm going to go over 3. And these particular 3 are really in order. And so the first one says we are going to be the only dentist in our only location. So how do we take home $1 million? It requires us to have $2 million in collections. And how do we get to $2 million in collections? You can see that it's $165,000 a month. That means that we need $2,750 from hygiene every day, and we need $5,500 from the doctor every day. Okay, how realistic is it to get $2,750 from hygiene? I can tell you that our hygienists do $2,600 a day. So that for me is like 1 to 1.5 hygienists. Maybe for the average practice, that's 2 full-time hygienists. But that's what we need. We need $2,750 in hygiene a day. And then we need $5,500 from the doctor every day. And really, I don't want to get there running. I don't want to get there sweating. I don't want to be like cutting faster to get there. I want to get there the laziest way possible so that I can maintain my career and be happy. And that way, to get $5,500 a day is really one $4,000 case and then a crown and some fillings. Well, how do we get a crown and some fillings? That's obviously easy, but how do we get the $4,000 case every day? That has to do with marketing for that case, assuming we know how to do it, right? Marketing for that implant case or marketing for that ortho case, being able to handle that consultation to convert with proper payment options and proper communication techniques. And I'll go over some of that in this little webinar. But we need to be able to build a marketing lead flow that will get us one $4,000 case a day accepted. We'll do a little crown and some fillings, and we will feel lazy and take home $1 million every year. Now, I coach one-on-one currently about 15 entrepreneurial dentists. Nearly every single one of them takes home $1 million every year or more. So this, if you're not used to this kind of number, this might sound really high to you. I know there's plenty of people on this call that are already doing this, but maybe you got here a harder way. Maybe you got lots of locations. Maybe it's taken you 15 years to get there. I can tell you that it took me 1 year as a new dentist to get here. And that was from a wheelchair as I was pulling back my dentistry. So this is the first model. Now, what's interesting is that while dentists chase growth, many times they grow not just their collections, but they grow their expenses. which is why they don't tend to grow their take-home pay very quickly. You see, so what we want to do is we want to grow to $2 million in collections, but without hiring an army of staff, without spending a fortune on a large location, without employing a ton of dentists. In this model, it's all about getting to $2 million in collections by diagnosing in a healthy way and having very high case acceptance. And this can easily be a PPO model, does not need to be fee for service. So when we make decisions about profitability, we may not choose to add a bunch more staff or add more ops or add another associate. When we make decisions about profitability, we might become much more focused on saying yes to the things that bring more collections that don't necessarily cost more money. So this is the first model. Then we've got the next model. So this first model, we're the full-time dentist in one location. The next model, we become a part-time dentist. And this is the model I used my second year out of school. I took home almost $1.4 million take-home pay as a second-year dentist working from a wheelchair. And I didn't realize what I was doing at the time, but we've gone and repeated this a whole lot since then. So what this is we, the owner, are going to build a virtual practice. We are going to act like a specialist. Maybe we'll do implants and ortho, for example. We're going to have our actual practice staffed with some associate dentists. Those associate dentists are getting all of our patient flow. They're doing all the exams. They're producing. They're making good money in a well-run practice. And with their dentistry, all the bills are paid for the entire practice, and there's a little bit of profit. Now we add our dentistry. Because all the bills are paid, our little ortho dentistry has practically no overhead. So when I produce $1 million a year in ortho and implants, my associates' collections have covered the cost of everything in order for me to use some empty chair time with a dental assistant that's already been hired, with the utilities that have already been paid to do my $1 million in collections. And suddenly, my little specialty practice has practically 0% overhead. So I could take home $1 million just by producing close to $1 million. And that can be done on 1 day a week, maybe 2 days a week, just depends on how much specialty work we do. So again, and I can tell you my own personal story. I had 3 associates and I was working 1 day a week doing comprehensive and Invisalign and short-term braces. And I was running 6 chairs 1 day a week. And my associates I had 3 full-time associates covering all the overhead and getting paid well for themselves. And of course, leaving a little bit of profit left over. And that is how I took home nearly 1.4 million. And we repeated this over and over again. But again, you have to be very deliberate about it. So in order to do this, we have to have a facility that has enough chair time for multiple doctors. That might mean more ops. It might mean more hours. We also have to have the owner dentist invest in the education and the equipment it takes, the technology it takes in order for them to do as many of those larger specialty type procedures as possible. So we've got the facility time for the dentist. We've got the owner with the specialty skills and equipment. And then of course, we have to be able to bring in those specialty procedures again through marketing. And the key here is to build a large enough patient base where from that patient base of multiple associates, we're able to have enough implants and ortho to be able to generate enough revenue so we can take home $1 million part-time. And this is the first time in kind of the different phases where now the owner is no longer handcuffed to the recall schedule. So this is an owner that can take weeks off should they want to. They don't have to come into work to do those recall exams. They don't have to shut down the practice if they're sick. We've got associate dentists that are producing as general dentists. They're the ones covering the recalls. So realistically, you're looking at a practice that has $2 to $4 million in collections per year with multiple associates, and you're going to be taking home $1 million every single year, working part-time, not covering exams. And for many dentists I've coached in the past 10 years, this is a sustainable model that allows them to focus on their life. They never feel burnt out from dentistry. They never feel trapped. They don't feel tempted to sell either. It's kind of like jogging at a really slow pace, and like you can jog 10, 15 miles that way. But when you sprint, when every day feels like you're sprinting, you can't run that far and you feel burned out in your career. This is a situation where you just feel like you're slowly jogging to $1 million take home pay every day. It checks off a lot of boxes of balance. All right, so that's the second model, where you're a part-time dentist in this kind of virtual practice. The first model, you're the only dentist in the only location, and you have made very strategic decisions so that you can take home $1 million. Second model is this virtual practice part-time dentist. The third model, you're no longer picking up a handpiece. In the third model, you've got enough associates and enough business systems and profitability so that you're generating $1 million of income solely through being the owner of the organization. And realistically, you're looking at around 5.5 million of collections per year or more, depending on a few factors. And that might be 6 dentists that are kind of normal producing dentists. You could do it with less if the dentists are high producing. Of course, you might need a few more if you've got really low producing dentists. But in general, you're looking at 6 dentists and about 1.5 hygienists per dentist. When you achieve these ratios, taking home $1 million every year by being an owner is something very achievable. And if you aren't, that means there's things that are broken that need to be fixed. And the great thing about things that need to be fixed when you're not the dentist is that you have all the time and all the focus to just fix them. You know, right now, if you're a dentist, you're probably thinking, you could think of things that you need to address, you need to fix. You just sometimes feel like you just don't have the time or even the stamina to get there. Well, when you're in this model, you're no longer the dentist. And so you have more time, you have more emotional space and stamina to address things. And for the most part in dentistry, the things that need to be fixed aren't complicated. They just aren't. The hard thing about fixing things in dentistry is not that it's so complicated. It's that we don't carve out time and focus to do it. So this model, we have that time and focus. If we're collecting $5.5 million in multiple locations with associate dentists, we should be taking home $1 million every single year for the rest of our career or more. And of course, in this model, when we're done with our career and it's time to retire, we've got several dental practice assets we could eventually sell for, of course, additional money for our retirement. So these 3 phases, they kind of go in order. So we've got a new dentist, they may do a startup practice, and they get to $2 million revenue by year 3, or they may buy a practice and kind of clean it up and refocus their efforts and get to $2 million. And they're working full time. Then they, at some point in their career, they'd like to pull time back. Maybe their kids are young or maybe their kids are teenagers and they want to spend more time at home, or maybe they've let their health kind of get away from them and they're at the point in their life where they want to focus on their health, or they want new passions and they say to themselves, I wish I could just work less. That's when they go to the second phase where they build a virtual specialty practice. And then at some point they say, you know what, I really want to do something else in life other than dentistry. Maybe it could be, like for me, a physical issue, or maybe they're just ready for something new. And that's when they can go to this third model that is associate driven. All right, so those are the 3 models. Now, of course, any model we pick, any practice we have, a lot of us need to focus on growing that practice. I just want to make sure, though, that growing the practice is hopefully done in a way that grows profitability, not in a way that grows costs, grows people, grows problems. We don't want to just double our size and double our problems and double our people. We want to be able to grow in a way that's thoughtful, that's disciplined. And some of us, like me, I'm not very disciplined unless I have someone kind of coaching me. Some of us need a coach sometimes to kind of get us refocused and reset and really accountable to doing the smart thing or the reasonable thing. Some of us, though, we can do it on our own. So if you're growing your practice, please keep my little voice in the back of your head sometimes and say, hey, are you choosing to grow in a way that grows profitability, or are you choosing to grow it right now in a way that might grow your problems? Now, the drivers of growth, there's three main drivers of growth in dental practice. They are patient flow, diagnosis, and case acceptance. You increase any of those three things and the practice can grow, assuming you have room in your schedule to grow, you can grow the practice. And it's actually a formula. It's patient flow times diagnosis times case acceptance. And that's important because if you happen to bring on an associate dentist that diagnoses less dentistry, that means your diagnosis went down. But if you can increase your patient flow, you'll end up in the same spot. Or if your patient flow drops in half, but your case acceptance doubles, you end up in the same spot. These drivers are weighted equally. And it's very important to understand that because some of these drivers are harder to grow, such as patient flow maybe, compared to other drivers, such as diagnosing more dentistry after you learn a new procedure. So it's important to understand that they're all weighted equally. Now, on patient flow isn't just new patients, it's also existing patients. But new patients are where a lot of us focus. And I can tell you that new patients come from marketing and from managing the phones correctly. Less than 5% of appointments scheduled today are scheduled online. More than 95% are scheduled through the phone. And I don't know if many of you are aware of this, but the average practice misses nearly a third of their phone calls. And of the calls they answer from new patients, less than half of those new patients even schedule. So when you do the math and look at these national averages, if the typical practice gets 100 new patients calling them, they only end up with 29 appointments scheduled. 100 new patients called. But after we miss some calls and we don't convert some calls, we only end up with 29 appointments. So a lot of increasing new patient flow has to do with managing the phones properly. So here's a couple things you can consider for patient flow. So first thing, hiring virtual schedulers. The company, our favorite company for this is called Reach. And these are virtual schedulers that are highly trained, they're skilled, they have software helping them, and they are answering the phone calls from new patients that you miss. So you're going to miss about a third of your calls if you're normal. Reach will go in and save those calls. And for every dollar you spend on Reach saving your calls, their average is that they schedule $9.80 back in production. So this is a no-brainer thing to consider. And we have a very specific way we teach at Breakaway to structure Reach's phone calls. And so I encourage you, if you don't already use a virtual scheduling center, that you reach out to Reach and see what they can offer you. There are other companies as well. And in a previous life, I built and owned my own company way back when. And I can tell you, I know a whole lot about building call centers, and Reach has the best quality metrics that I've found yet, including better than of the company I used to own, right? Another thing you can do to increase patient flow, especially if you do special procedures, is something that most dentists don't do. It's called email lead cultivation. So a lot of dentists think that you create an ad and a patient clicks on your ad and hits your homepage or hits a landing page, and they'll call or they won't, but that's it. You just try to get them to call in that moment. What we found out is the majority of patients don't call you after one touch point in advertising. They will call you after the 6th, 7th, 9th touch point. So what we want to do is we want to capture their email address and then drip communication to them, not spam them, but drip quality educational communication to them. So here's how it might work. The patient clicks on your ad that's been structured properly, hits a landing page, and they could click to schedule right there, but they want to know if they're a good candidate for All on 4, for example. So they'll fill out a little quiz, they'll put in their email address, and they'll get an answer. And now they've opted in on their email address. Now you've got an automated campaign through email lead cultivation that will send them the first email before and after photos. Second email will be a video of a patient talking about what it meant for their life. Third email will be an article about the doctor that does it. Fourth email might be payment options. And you see, while that patient that clicked once wasn't emotionally ready to schedule on that Tuesday, Maybe 5 weeks later and 7 emails later, they finally said, you know what, I do need this. Enough is enough. It's time. And then they call you. And each one of you that is not using this strategy, you are losing those patients you should have had that responded to your ad initially, but you didn't have a way to water that seed. You didn't have a way to cultivate them. Dentalmarketing.com is a company that we use in the practices we own to do exactly what I said. And when we think about taking home $1 million, part of that formula could involve the owner doing specialty procedures, and marketing's a big deal. And this is how we do it. All right, so there's another tip. All right, so back to the drivers of growth. We got patient flow, we got diagnosis, we got case acceptance. All right, let's talk about the second one, diagnosis. Diagnosing more dentistry. Diagnosing more dentistry sometimes means finding more dentistry that we missed. And there are two companies right now that are artificial intelligence companies, Overjet and Pearl. And their machined learning software scans x-rays, finds the smallest nuances in shades of gray, and can understand when it's decay, when it's bone loss, when it's periapical radiolucencies, and highlight all those areas, not just for the doctor to see, but for the patient to see as well. It becomes a second set of eyes. And no matter how good we are as dentists, we're going to miss things every now and then, especially for younger dentists. Especially if we're associate dentists early on in their career, we're going to miss things every now and then. And Overjet and Pearl find a ton of dentistry. It's shocking, actually, a ton of dentistry that we miss with the human eye sometimes. Now, diagnosing more isn't just finding more. Diagnosing more sometimes means learning new procedures. For example, fixing an anterior crossbite with a Hawley appliance with a spring on a kid. We can learn how to do that, and for the rest of our career, we'll diagnose more dentistry. Or learning how to place implants, right? Sometimes diagnosing more is being more up to date with what the ADA says we should be diagnosing. For example, any adult that has a cavity should be getting fluoride and sealants according to the ADA, no matter what their insurance pays for or doesn't pay for. Sometimes diagnosing more isn't just fixing the problem, but it's fixing the cause. We have patients with abfraction lesions. Sure, we need to fix the lesion, but maybe we should also do an occlusal equilibration and an eye guard. And are we diagnosing all those things every time we see an abfraction lesion? I bet some of us are not. So diagnosis is a big deal. And there's a lot of strategies that we just need to be focused on. We just need to be focused on doing the right thing preventative wise, focus on offering cosmetic options, focus on solving the source of the problems, and utilizing technology to help us act as a second set of eyes in finding things. And that's diagnosis. All right, so we have patient flow, we have diagnosis. That last driver growth is case acceptance. And case acceptance, multifaceted. You may not know this, but even the room that you present finances in matters. The operatory has the highest case acceptance, not some private office at the front desk area. What the treatment coordinator says impacts case acceptance. What the doctor says. Patients seeing images or not impacts case acceptance. Patients seeing Pearl and Overjet or the Sopro camera finding cavities impacts case acceptance. But also what impacts it are the payment options. And that's where I want to provide you one little tip on another company that we use in our practice. We use a company called Sunbit. Sunbit provides financing for patients with poor credit. So all those patients where the other financing companies do not approve them, Sunbit comes in and without adding risk to the practice at all, it provides financing for high-risk patients and the practice gets paid up front. More than 90% of patients are accepted on Sunbit. And imagine what happens to case acceptance when more than 90% of patients can be put on a payment plan, even if they've got poor credit. And that's just, example. There's lots of things that really impact case acceptance. And we need to be a study of these business processes. We have to have strong processes if we expect to easily be a millionaire every year. Now, I mentioned processes. I'm just giving you kind of a taste of the many, many processes that we do and we teach. But besides processes to grow a practice, we also have to understand profit doesn't just come from collections. Profit comes from cutting expenses. And we need to have a way to pay less money than we are today for things. And that is through a DPSO. And to be very transparent here, my parent company, Dental Whale, is the largest DPSO in the country. I'm going to tell you what a DPSO does and why it's important to you. And yes, I benefit personally if you join our DPSO, but please understand there's other companies you could join. You need to understand this. And then of course you can decide, who you're going to work with. So I'm going to teach it to you real quick. A DPSO is a dental purchasing and services organization. Kind of like what you might think with a buying group, but it's more and it's bigger. DPSO. And as a private dentist or a small DSO, you get negotiated savings on all these things, on labs, supplies, equipment, and repair. And just to put this into perspective, my company, we will likely represent more dental supply purchases per year than Heartland will do this year. So in other words, our pricing is on par and maybe better than the largest DSOs in this country. And who gets that pricing? The private dentist in rural Indiana can get that pricing. So give you an idea here on supply side, this is a big problem in the industry. A lot of practices are spending 8 to 9% of their collections on supplies. It's crazy how much they're spending. Our practices spend 3.8% on average, 3.8. And the difference between 9% and 3.8% could be $60,000 of profit just lost due to overspending on supplies. There's 3 steps that I would normally take at half an hour to go over. And I'm going to probably take 30 seconds instead of 30 minutes. There's 3 steps to saving money on supplies. Step 1 is to join a group so you get the lowest pricing. Lowest pricing, step 1. But that's not the only step. Step 2 is picking the right brands. And in order to pick the right brands, you got to have lots of options. I can tell you that you are not getting all the options if you are buying your supplies from one of the big companies that we all know. You're not getting all the options. For example, in our group, there's a medical company that's 4 times bigger than the big dental companies that provides masks and gloves and PPE to all the hospitals and so forth. And while you might have been struggling during COVID to find masks and 95 masks and your glove prices skyrocketed, we didn't have those same problems as you because we had other brands we had access to because we were tapped into the medical community. So that's step 2 in saving money on supplies is having access to other brands that are also more affordable, more readily available. Step 1, being part of a group for low pricing. Step 2, more brands. Step 3, the most important step is actually step 3. Enforce the budget. Never should an order be placed if it's over 4% budget, which means you have to change your process. You can still have your dental assistant put the order together, but you have to be the one approving it or not before it goes out. You can't just be okay buying expensive purple gloves because they match your purple scrubs. No, you have to enforce a 4% budget. Otherwise, you're going to lose 60 grand a year cash maybe for the rest of your career every year. It's not acceptable. We have to be better than that. We have to be able to take a moment every week and enforce the budget. All right. So that's supply savings. There's maybe 60 grand for a typical practice. Also in a DPSO, you get savings on lab fees. I don't know what you pay for a Brux or Crown, but we've got practices that are paying something like 39 bucks a unit. Might be the same lab you use. And that's what happens when you're as big as we are or some other groups are, is you're able to negotiate pricing that way for your members. So you can save maybe 30 grand right there a year in cost. Your equipment is much more affordable. Your repairs are much more affordable. It's amazing how much you can save on equipment when you buy it through a large group compared to trying to do it on your own with some of the bigger dental companies. So there's a lot of money saved. Our DPSO is called Dental Whale. And of course, there's others out there as well. The key here is that you need to be part of a group. Don't go at this alone. You have the ability through a simple decision to change how your practice is treated from a pricing perspective on these things. And you need to do the right thing for your practice so that every year, the rest of your career, you don't lose this money you should have kept. All right. So now back to kind of this topic, taking home $1 million. it all stems from this balance that a lot of us maybe feel like we're losing. We're losing this work-life balance. It just seems like we work harder to have the life we want, but what ends up happening is we just have less life. We just keep working harder. And that's where we've gotten good at winning the wrong game. That's what I call that. Getting good at winning the wrong game. That's a very dangerous thing. So what I want us to take home $1 million at least every year so that we can therefore not compromise our life. When we have excess money, we have excess choice for our life. In other words, you're going to have your version again of this. You're going to have this life. And somewhere on this slide, it says, oh, let's go work and make $1 million, right? I'm going to prioritize my passions, my health, my relationships, my family, whatever it is important to me. I'm going to prioritize that. And I'm going to compromise my time given to work. And whatever time's left over, that little box, I'm now going to get very disciplined and focused and make the right decisions so that we take home $1 million take home pay. So schedule my best life, whatever that might mean. Massages twice a week, personal trainer every morning, someone to take my kids to all their practices, 2 date nights a week. I take the kids to school every morning, whatever that might be. We're going to schedule our best life. And then whatever time's left over, we're going to make $1 million inside of that little box. All right. So here are the companies that I talked about. The only company that, my parent company is Dental Whale. So, I talked about these other companies as well. And then if real quick, if you feel like this was neat, cool, and you want to learn the ins and outs of how we manage practices, how we grow them, how we start them, you want to go through a very intense kind of business training, you can go to breakawayseminar.com and you can look at our training. I also do private coaching for some entrepreneurial dentists, and these are very intense courses. They're really, really good. They're 16 hours of this. Last but not least, Paul asked if we could put something together for the members. We've got a little slide right here. If those of y'all want to come to a seminar, you want to save 15% off, that'll probably pay for your flight or your hotel. There's the discount code Paul wanted us to have. So my team agreed. So there you go, Paul. There's
Awesome.
a discount code for your members.
My grandmother was right, Scott. People are lucky just to know me. So I really appreciate you shared amazing value here. I want to ask you some questions. We had more people join in while you were talking. So really just so phenomenal. Take advantage. First, I want to go over, we're going to leave this up for just a few seconds and we'll stop share so we're bigger. What are the courses people can use this discount for? I know you have Breakaway Startup, but you have other awesome courses too. Tell us about those.
Yeah, just real quick. There's 4 courses that I teach at Breakaway. One is called the Advanced Startup. That's for anyone that wants to learn how we build a $2 million startup. It's also for anyone that's about to do a construction project. You'll learn how to save a fortune and you'll learn how to build a beautiful office. The second course is the varsity course, the flagship course, the Business Masters Seminar. That is the ins and outs of practice management, 400 pages of content. It's intense. Then we've got a course for office managers that is like the Business Masters course. And we've got a course that helps dentists build and manage multi-location organizations. Those are the 4 courses.
Love those. That's a great breakdown. We're going to dig in that. You can stop share for a second there, Scott. We'll see us bigger.
Sure.
I'm going to do some Q&A. Really phenomenal presentation. Loved how you ran through the different ways to get to $1 million from on your own to associate-driven practices. Couple of questions I want to ask you. We're actually talking about Dr. Lincoln Harris early on before we got on, and I asked people at the end of these, when people see the Scott Leune, the Lincoln Harris, the Jason Smiths, and all these people, they say they must have had it, they must be magical. They must have, had it easy. They must just be super talented, but they have, like you said, a windy road to get in. I asked Link, what do you wish you would have done sooner in your career? His answer was, I wish I paid for coaching sooner. I wish I didn't try to figure it out myself for so long. I didn't wish I really banged my head against the wall. What's something, if someone's watching who's a newish dentist saying, what does Scott wish he did sooner in his career? What would your answer to that be?
What's interesting is my answer is going to be different than what I think I would tell other people to say.
Gotcha.
So I tell other people that probably one of the biggest regrets or issues they would have in their career looking back is that they just didn't make a change fast enough. They just didn't commit to moving forward. They just didn't get off their ass and take a step forward. We're all so good at talking about it. We're all so good at analyzing it. We're all so good at judging other people. But when it comes time to actually do something, a lot of us just don't do it or don't do it fast enough. And that's what I think most people should probably say to that question. But that wasn't me, because I was forced out of the chair by a medical injury and thrown in the freaking ocean to learn how to swim. And I had to succeed or fail. I had 700 new patients a month with 3 locations as a third-year dentist back when people weren't having multiple locations. I built 7 offices at once. After that, every Monday we opened a new office. At one time, I was hiring 30 people a month in my call center, marketing center, so fast we had to spray paint plywood and call it a desk. And I wasn't funded. And so I have all these other kind of challenges and lessons. And in my world, this is going to be a really boring answer. But what I wish I would have done much sooner was passionately goal set and audit.
I like
which
that.
is kind of a weird thing, but it's so easy to lose focus. If we set our goals and implement what we need, and then don't forget the audit, it actually happens.
Love that.
Some of us just don't set the goals, so we're busy in the wrong thing. Some of us do the right thing, but don't audit it, and so it never sticks. It's never implemented. It's amazing how little work auditing takes and how powerful it is. And when you're auditing the thing that achieves your goal, you achieve it. And I wish I would have done that a lot sooner.
Passionate goal setting auditing is great. I take something away from that myself. Great dental student on here who I kindly anoint through Instagram, and I'm so glad he has a question for us. Thank you so much for this valuable presentation, Dr. Goodman and Dr. Leune. How many years after graduation do you recommend before a new dentist opens up their own practice? Good question. I get a lot too. Interested to hear your answer.
Yeah, maybe a little crazy, but the soonest possibly can is when you should open a practice. In other words, is it the right thing to be an owner? Well, you have the highest income potential, you have the highest control, you have the highest ability to impact your work-life balance, your quality of care, the staff you're around, the kind of practice, the kind of dentistry you do, your take-home pay. You have the highest ability to impact that when you're an owner. When's the right time to do the right thing? Right now. Yeah. And so too many of us come up with reasons why it's not the right time. The reality is every day that goes by, we get farther away from when we should have done it. I kind of look back and say, well, when was the right time to have a kid? Geez, I have no idea how to answer that question, but I'm so glad I did have children. I didn't wait. Had I waited, I'd probably only have 2, and my youngest 3 wouldn't exist. Had I not owned a practice in the beginning of my career, I would have been from a wheelchair out of dentistry completely. Had I not made $1.4 million my second year out, I would have paid off all my debt in my entire life and my wife's debt and been financially stable. The fastest way I know how to create financial freedom and security in dentistry is to be an owner. So
I like that. I want to deepen that a little bit with you, because I like eating out at restaurants. I'm sure you enjoy good restaurants too. Philadelphia has a world-class restaurant scene. And this dental student asked, this is great. I asked this with curiosity. So the owning a practice, you have to have a whole set of business skills that you develop, right? You teach this at Breakaway, you teach this, but then dental schools have been given less and less clinical experience. You know, if a chef could open up a restaurant, but if they really can't make the food yet, how do you recommend dentists merge this, right? If they're shaky on clinical skills out of dental school because dental schools have not delivered that experience.
Yeah, I don't agree with you. So I'm gonna get a little off here. If we compare it to the analogy of a restaurant, what we should say is it's like building a restaurant where everyone's starving. Even if we're not the best at making the food and we pick the perfect location, we're still going to be able to sell food. And that's actually what dentistry is like. And when does speed actually matter as a dentist? Not until you're slammed busy, doesn't matter. If you only have 2 patients a day, I don't care if you take 1 hour, 3 hours to cut a crown, you don't make any more money. Right. So what the natural progression of owning a practice is to not be as busy in the beginning until you learn how to manage it better. And then you get busier. Well, during that same time as a young dentist, you're also improving your clinical skills and your speed. And you can make great take-home pay doing slow dentistry only the procedures you're good at and comfortable with. So just because you're not a super dentist doesn't mean you can't make a great living.
Oh, for sure. I mean,
Much better
I
living.
just get a lot of new grads reaching out to me saying, hey, I only did a few crowns in dental school. Where should I go next to learn? I only got a chance to do these handful of extractions. Where should I go next to learn? I know as someone that there are pressures being a business owner and doing the clinical part at the same time. Getting help is key. I
Yeah,
think
so maybe I didn't say that properly. So I believe we should be an owner as soon as possible. We should not let our fears of our skills, clinically or business, or our speed change that. But when we commit to being an owner, just like when we commit to being a dentist, we also commit to learning the best we can and as fast as we can. And for that, we need business learning and we need clinical learning, and we need to be a continuous consumer of the two for the rest of our career. So we can ride the bike, okay, but we need to learn how to ride it better and better and better every year. And it's amazing how good some young dentists are clinically and on the business side when they've just committed to learning, when they've carved out a budget and carved out time to do so.
I like that. Now, a couple of speed rounds. I'll let you go. And I get is startup and acquisition. Have you done both or only startups?
No, I've done both.
Both. What are they? If someone's watching right now and say, what's a benefit to an acquisition? Go against your startup. What's a benefit to an acquisition?
Yeah, I mean, the benefit is that it's immediate cash flow, and it's cash flow that you can, within reason, predict. Yeah. You can also, if you're buying multiple locations over time, existing practices are easier to finance compared to startup. They take less time, so you can get into them very quickly. They're harder to find sometimes than startup locations, but you can also acquisitions that are used as mergers can become incredibly profitable overnight. Most of the benefits are about predictability and short-term financial success. The
drawback. Give us the draw. Go your
longer-term financial success.
Give me a drawback on acquisitions real quick. A con of acquisitions. What's a drawback?
Drawback is you are going into a location that might not be ideal long-term, with a team that might not be ideal, with equipment that might not be ideal, and you're having to have everyone unlearn their unideal business systems, and you're having to diagnose based off of unideal diagnosis before you. All of that is actually an opportunity to grow what you just bought, but it also becomes a challenge to deal with, and it creates pain points that take a toll on you when you go through the acquisition process.
I think you actually have to be a much more agile leader for acquisitions because of that team part. Because a startup, you can build your own group in slowly, I think. And I think, when you inherit a team like I have over the time that have been there for decades, that is a nuanced type of leadership. Now give us a benefit of startups.
Well, actually, it's just a different kind of leadership.
Yeah.
So you could say it's really hard to be a leader in a startup when you're losing money every month and you're somehow having to make lemonade out of lemons, and you're hiring all new employees that don't necessarily know how to do anything, and they don't know you and they don't know each other. That's a different kind of leader. When a startup, you kind of have a team that's kind of already operating under the old leadership. And so there's some benefits, but then you got to be the leader of change, implementing change, and of getting buy-in and commitment and influence. It's all, it's all a challenge, and you don't have to be good at it.
Both routes can be successful. You've done both routes. As we wrap up, you really do inspire dentists, though, with your breakaway startup course. Someone's watching now, live or on demand later, and they're thinking, I want to go to this startup course. I'm not sure if I want to do a startup. I might want to do an acquisition. Does this material fit with any type of practice ownership you're going to be a part of?
Yeah, a long time ago, I stripped out the aspects of the breakaway model that were really specific about your location or your type of patient or the type of dentistry you did. What we've done, we've scaled nationwide for years and years and years, applies to every kind of situation. These are the laws of dental business success. They're not the nuances that only apply to some. They're the laws that are the foundation of all. So when we talk about how to manage a practice properly, the laws of case acceptance aren't changing from practice to practice. And that's just a tiny little example. The laws of scheduling efficiencies, things like that. So I think what someone should expect that is learning business systems is that when they learn them from our model, they're going to learn something that applies to everyone. And they're going to be inundated with information. They're going to be sitting there all day long for 2 days, but they're going to be exhausted and excited. It's kind of a weird balance. They're going to be exhausted and excited, and they can't help but look at dentistry differently, because through my failures and my successes and our data, we've found the truths that unfortunately most dentists don't abide by.
And you can learn from someone just finding out before you. I like that. Exhausted and excited. That's like a new parent, Scott. So that fits. I'll leave you on this question. This guy's coming to Philly soon. He's so nice. How do you go about finding staff, especially doctors, to add to a startup practice? How do you go about finding your team?
Can you repeat the question when you broke up?
Oh, sorry. How do you go about finding staff, especially doctors, to add to a startup practice?
Well, I don't know the magical website that's got all the best team members. How do you find good people? I don't know how to find good people. But what I know is how to create an environment around people where they become the better version of themselves. So when I give them the tools, the checklists, the oversight, and the auditing, they then become a really good version of themselves. And I can look at most problems in a practice, and most dentists wish they had better people. And I can tell you, for the rest of your career, you're going to have the same problem. You're going to always wish you had better people, because it's not a people problem. It's an environment problem. And you got to create the right environment where normal people become great. Now, dentists are a little odd, because we're not influenced a lot by our environment. We're not even influenced by how we're paid sometimes. We do things that are against our best interests due to our emotional state sometimes.
Yeah.
And so that's a whole different ballgame on how to find and incentivize and manage a dentist to be both a good clinician and a good generator of profits for the company and themselves.
Yeah.
That's an entire freaking course. But there are tips and strategies in that equation. There are ingredients to it that can apply to any situation that definitely make it easier to have a dentist be successful. But I'll tell you, the easiest way to have a dentist be successful is to have successful business systems around them. If we have a better payment option, for example, will case acceptance go up no matter who the dentist is? If we say the right thing on the phone, we get more new patients no matter who the dentist is. That is an easy strategy to tackle compared to finding a needle in a haystack of this like rock star dentist that's coming through that wants to just be an associate.
Totally get that. Well, I'm going to let you go with your family. Before you go, Scott, I remember I've been on a lot of podcasts. People say numbers this. What's the website? Someone just scrolled by right now and said, I want to go and find out everything I can about you on your website. What's the best website for them to go to?
Sure. Breakawayseminar.com.
Breakawayseminar.com. Reach out to us for a nacho discount. Thanks so much for being part of this, Scott. This was so much great value. Appreciate you spending your time with us and the Dental Nachos crew.
All right. Thanks a lot.
Thanks so much. Have a great night. Everyone watching in, thanks so much for being part of this. I'm going to end the webinar here soon. If you need to reach out to us for any reason,